want to talk about David Lynch. I wanted to basically all year since he passed away in January. In the months since then, I found myself returning to his work again and again, turning over details and surprises in my mind. And when I think of Lynch's work, I think of very specific images, moments that I'm still unable to shake. Like Laura Palmer wrapped in plastic at the beginning of Twin Peaks, or the abstract cataclysmic evil that will eventually find its way to her in The Return. Or the dream of Winky's Diner in Mulholland Drive, or the mystery man in Lost Highway. The moment I've been thinking about the most these past few months is the beginning of one of my first experiences with Lynch. Blue velvet. The sky is perfectly blue. The roses are perfectly red. The picket fences are perfectly white, and as Lynch takes us on a tour over the surfaces of this picture-perfect small town, a man collapses, water from his hose spraying up towards the heavens, and the camera, an all-too-curious eye, moves through blades of grass into what seems like a deep, endless abyss. Only then do we return to the pristine skies and perfect facade as a billboard beckons us in. Welcome to Lumberton. From then on, Lynch's film goes deep into the rotten core of the perfect illusion of the suburbs, seemingly always driven by these contrasts of light and shadow, bugs and birds, salvation and damnation. But I'm getting ahead of myself. John Carpenter's 1978 opus, Halloween, occupies an interesting place in film history. It took some of the fundamentals from Psycho and Black Christmas, a mysterious figure wielding a knife, women in peril, and a faintly conservative political philosophy, and codified them into what would become one of cinema's most reliable subgenres, something that would spawn countless, endless franchises, a formula that would be made, remade, and revived for decades. The slasher. It's been close to 50 years since we were introduced to the sleepy town of Haddonfield, Illinois, and Michael Myers, the masked assailant who would reliably stalk its streets year in and year out on Halloween night. But this first film isn't at its most interesting, or even its most frightening, when Michael is doing the stalk and slash routine. Instead, Halloween really comes alive when it just lets Haddonfield and its inhabitants live and breathe. Carpenter has a real eye for these spare, languid shots of people walking down the street or gazing out a window looking for something beyond the small world of Haddonfield, Illinois. And this is where some of the most effective jolts of horror come from too. Michael emerging from the bushes, or appearing in a long shot and then vanishing again. His presence threatens the delicate balance of suburbia. Through his acts of violence, Michael literally punctures the illusory perfection of towns like Lumberton and Haddonfield. The suburbs have always existed, in geography and in imagination, as a place that's just a little out of reach, built on the outskirts of cities and symbolic of the post-war idea of the American dream. The manicured lawn, the white picket fence, a family, a dog, all things that appear at the beginning of Blue Velvet. Even the weather seems almost too perfect, the cloudless sky and beaming sunlight. But this perfection so often comes at a price. Conformity. There's a sterility to these landscapes. Levittowns, the first suburban homes, were cheap, mass-produced, and uniform. In one of his many cries against the constraints of suburbia, Revolutionary Road, the novelist Richard Yates wrote, "The Revolutionary Hill estates had not been designed to accommodate a tragedy. Even at night, as if on purpose, the development held no looming shadows and no gaunt silhouettes. It was invincibly cheerful, a toyland of white and pastel houses whose bright, uncurtained windows winked blandly through a dappling of green and yellow leaves. A man running down these streets in desperate grief was indecently out of place. For all of the paradise that the suburbs have come to promise in American life and culture, those gilded gates won't open for just anyone. In a 1967 oil painting, New Kids in the Neighbourhood, Norman Rockwell casts his eye, normally so pastoral, comfortable, non-confrontational, on the racial divides that could exist within suburban communities, as if a place like this could only be home to a certain kind of person. There are some similarities between the two groups of kids. Each has a pet, Both of the boys are interested in baseball. In the top left corner, peering out from behind the curtains, is an adult who seems less sure about an integrated suburbia. This looming presence feels like one of the most unsettling ideas of suburban life, that these places are actually a panopticon, an innovation in prison design from the 18th century, in which a looming central tower makes every inmate feel like they're always being watched, the threat of perception alone being enough to change their behaviour. In Blue Velvet, Jeffrey Beaumont, home from college and thrust into a strange mystery, makes plans with Sandy, the girl next door, to track down a mysterious lounge singer that he's becoming obsessed with. At first, their plan is to masquerade their recon mission as a date, but the tight grip of suburban life gets in the way. Sandy tells Jeffrey that he can't come and pick her up. Her dad might think it's weird, and they can't stay together for too long, even in the middle of the day, in case someone sees them together. These worlds exist in an equilibrium where nothing, not violence, not social change, not even two people sitting alone in a car is free from the gaze of prying eyes or gossiping neighbours. Michael seems to be the most violent manifestation of this small-town panopticon in Halloween, always threatening to emerge from behind any corner. The landscape of the suburbs feel physically and metaphorically detached. The white picket fences act as borders between families, even as each live in near identical homes. The photographer Benjamin Grant uses satellite and aerial imagery to capture this relationship between human life and the landscape in Berwyn, Illinois, where the vast, sprawling scope of the suburbs becomes clear, a seemingly endless grid of houses that, from this distance and on this scale, look like prison cells. Berwyn's photo even captures the same state where Halloween is set. If you stay in these houses, walking those same gridded streets for too long, who knows what might happen. I don't really think of I Saw the TV Glow as a horror film. It has some rich, unsettling imagery, the distorted face of a man in the moon, and a Videodrome-esque moment of body horror in its final act, but really, it feels more like a coming-of-age film, one that's deeply sad and deeply, deeply trans, and of course, it feels like a film about the suburbs. I Saw the TV Glow is about two lonely high schoolers who bond over their shared love of a cult TV show, The Pink Opaque. It's a lifeline for both Owen and Maddie as they begin to see their own lives and possible futures reflected back at them in the flickering light of a TV screen. Maddie in particular becomes obsessed with the show, increasingly convinced that it's revealing some terrible truth to both her and Owen. But Owen isn't convinced, no matter how strange he might feel sometimes, or how magical his time spent with Maddie watching The Pink Opaque can be. He says,
"This isn't the Midnight Realm, Maddie. It's just the suburbs."
But if the grimy hidden depths of Blue Velvet, the looming threat of violence posed by Michael Myers in Halloween, and the deep sadness of I Saw the TV Glow tell us anything, it's that the suburbs and the Midnight Realm are the same. In Schoenbrun's film, the membrane between the reality of suburban life and the supernatural strangeness of the Pink Opaque gets thinner and thinner and thinner. This strange bleeding of one world into another happens in all of these fictional, not quite perfect suburban towns, just as the sun sets. Yates might have been right about the estates of Revolutionary Road not casting looming shadows or gaunt silhouettes, because if they did, then their invincible cheerfulness might be revealed to be deeply fragile. These tales of suburban terror carry with them some of Yates's ideas, the perfectly constructed beauty of the suburbs and their inability to contain tragedy. But at night, these worlds seem to transform. After all, the opening of Blue Velvet shows how close the world of suburban safety is to a strange, seedy underbelly, something just lurking beneath the perfectly manicured lawns of Lumberton. All it takes is for the camera to plunge momentarily out of the light and something strange and frightening can begin to take root. During the day, Michael looms in the background, an ominous, silent threat, but the violence in Halloween takes place at night. From the very beginning, the film's now iconic point-of-view shot that follows a masked figure through a house, picking up a kitchen knife and walking up the stairs. This is a film that tells us that, at night, something about the world changes. The same thing happens in I Saw the TV Glow. The power that the pink opaque seems to have over Owen and Maddie is amplified by the way in which they watch it. In secret, late at night. Lynch takes these ideas to their breaking point in Blue Velvet, where Lumberton might as well be two separate worlds, the sun-kissed, just so wholesome town of the daytime, and the seedy, hidden world that emerges at night. It's only after the sun sets that the clean-cut, deeply earnest Jeffrey becomes exposed to this other side of Lumberton, one full of murder, mystery, and women in trouble. The image of the suburbs is one that's been built more on a perfectly defined facade than a strong foundation, the more sinister side of it being driven away by the sunlight, like some kind of supernatural monster. At night, a different Lumberton, maybe the real one, unfurls itself. This is when Jeffrey casts his eye on the lounge singer Dorothy Valens, enthralled by the way she sings Blue Velvet, and later, spying on her through the slats of her closet, he first encounters the psychosexual evil of Frank Booth, in a moment that completely upends the way Jeffrey understands not only Lumberton, but the whole world, as if nothing could exist outside the safety of that Welcome to Lumberton billboard. It haunts him in distorted, nightmarish images. But while this darkness is frighteningly easy to see, it isn't easy to accept. One of the most surprising things about Blue Velvet, for all of its horror, violence, and strange desires, is the fact that Jeffrey is just so earnest, so incapable of seeing how sinister the world he's been living in truly is, how easy it is for the veil to slip. Lynch's film is explicit and earnest, not just in the existence of evil in this world, but the cause of it. Because in Blue Velvet, Sandy, the girl next door, the Becky to Dorothy's Veronica, has a dream. In Sandy's dream, light is drained from the world because there were no robins. Because the robins represented love, and without that, the light of the world was disappearing. Lynch's view of the suburbs then is romantic. The vividness of the blue sky, the red roses, even the white picket fences is illuminated by love, of course. This is a love that, like the community of the suburbs themselves, isn't available to everyone. It's no wonder that Owen seems to find himself growing smaller, more tightly confined the more time he spends living there into and beyond his adolescence in I Saw the TV Glow. These suburban stories reveal a lot about themselves and the fates of their characters through what time it is when they end. The end of Blue Velvet is filled with visual parallels to the film's opening scene, except here we begin in the void. A close-up of Jeffrey's ear, an inversion of the severed one that he finds at the beginning of the story, and we move into the light. Jeffrey is lying on a deck chair and sees a robin chirping in a tree. At home, he looks out of a window with Sandy and sees another robin. This one has an insect in its mouth, as if the abyss from the first scene, full of skittering bugs, has somehow been purged. But not everyone in the suburbs can have the same fate, the same promise of an idyllic life. Not everyone can see a ray of light waiting for them at the end of a long, dark tunnel. At the end of Halloween, it's still nighttime, and although our final girl has survived, Michael has disappeared into the shadows once again. The idea of suburbia as a place of safety and stillness, forever shattered by his presence. I Saw the TV Glow doesn't end at night. Grey and overcast, it seems to end outside of time. Schoenbrun shoots the mundanity of suburban life in desaturated, almost lifeless colours. But here, more than anywhere else, it becomes clear that the suburbs are able to cast a strange spell on their inhabitants, keeping them close in a vice-like grip. They've always had the quality of a panopticon about them, and it's this constant, unblinking gaze that traps Owen in a life unwanted and half-lived. In a New Yorker profile, Schoenbrun describes the film as occupying the tension between the space that you exist within, which feels like home, and the simultaneous terror and liberation of understanding that that space might not be able to hold you in your true form. At the climax of I Saw the TV Glow, the possibility of Owen's true form, that desperate need for liberation, is revealed, and still, he's haunted by those memories of the pink opaque. But this staring down of his possible self isn't enough to free him from the shackles of suburbia. He walks back through the family entertainment centre where he works, half murmuring apologies to anyone that might have been unsettled by the panic attack that led to him sprinting to the bathroom, left to face his own reflection, some piece of himself desperate to be free from the just so inoffensive conformity of the suburbs. I want to talk about David Lynch. He's a filmmaker that we often think of as being impenetrable, obtuse, sometimes deliberately so. I mean, look at this clip from an interview with the man himself.
Believe it or not, Eraserhead is my most spiritual film.
Why elaborate on that?
No, I won't.
We tend to think of Lynch as a filmmaker animated by horror and unease more than anything else. We associate him with images like Laura Palmer wrapped in plastic at the beginning of Twin Peaks, or the abstract cataclysmic evil that will find its way to her in The Return, or the dream of Winky's Diner in Mulholland Drive, or the Mystery Man in Lost Highway. But in Blue Velvet, Lynch shows an affectionate, almost sentimental streak that will be even more important to his work than the surreal nightmares we associate with him. This is clearest in the final scene of Blue Velvet. The pastoral beauty that was shattered by the violence Jeffrey uncovers seems to have been tentatively restored. It's impossible to ignore what's come before it, or the violence of the suburbs that persists in Halloween and I Saw the TV Glow, as Jeffrey and Sandy look at Robbins out of the window and Dorothy embraces her son. The end of Blue Velvet feels like a dream, a contrast to the nightmares made flesh by Frank Booth, or Michael Myers, or the Man in the Moon. And yet, as Julie Cruz sings The Mysteries of Love, and the camera pans back to the two blue skies of Lumberton, it's difficult not to hope that Sandy's dream might still come true.